So we know that neurons in the visual cortex are tuned to different orientations, yet how this information are used to guide simple perceptual decisions, such as detecting a change of stimulus orientation, is not well understood. Perhaps the most well-established idea, like a computation, is those can estimate the orientation based on tuned population. And here, just simply put it, the x-axis is neurons grouping by different preferred orientation. And when this oriented visual stimulus is presented, neurons will prefer that orientation will fire a lot, therefore will vote a lot for its preferred orientation. Whereas neurons like with preferred orientation orthogonal to that stimulus, they will fire a lot less, therefore vote less for this preferred orientation. So then we can construct this population response function to identify the peak and estimate the orientation presented. And we know that adaptation has profound impact on sensory processing. And we simply define adaptation here as a history-dependent reduction of neuron activity that is scaled between the interstimulus interval between the adapter and the stimulus. We know, based on literature in the primates and the carnivores, adaptation specifically reduce the activity of neurons that prefer their preferred orientation closer to the adapter. So if we adapt this population with 0-degree adapter stimulus, and the neurons that prefer this adapter will fire a lot less, while the neurons with preferred orientation more far away from the adapter their activity will remain relatively unchanged. Therefore, this will lead to this biased estimate of orientation away from the adapter and resulting in an overestimate of orientation changes from the adapter and resulting in an general improvement in orientation change detection. So thus, we use adaptation as a diagnostic tool to identify a decoder that is most consistent with the effects of adaptation on animals' behavior. So to first determine how adaptation affects perceptually, we designed this orientation change detection task in which mouse is half fixed here. He needs to press down the lever to self-initiate trial. Once trial begins, it starts with a flash of vertical static baseline gradients followed by a change of orientation. Animal need to detect that change to release the lever within a certain time window to get a reward. Each visual presentation is separated by a different interstimulus interval, which is totally randomized by these 3 different values. Shorter interval indicates stronger adaptation. Longer interval indicates more recover from adaptation. So the light color coded here suggests stronger adaptation, which is same across all the rest of the talk. So here just show the example mouse performance where he's doing the task. So the first trial is a correct hit, when animal release the lever when there's a change, and he get a reward. The second trial is animal has a false alarm, which he released the lever when there's no change. He didn't get a reward and get a punishment of longer ITI. So when we plot the hit rate over different orientation changes and sort by different preceding interstimulus interval, we found that stronger adaptation actually decreased the hit rate of the animal, resulting in an increased orientation change detection threshold. This effect is consistent across 4 mice tested, where we normalize the detection threshold to the most adapted condition, find that stronger adaptation, higher orientation change detection threshold. So this indeed suggests that adaptation actually impairs orientation change detection, which is inconsistent with the theoretical prediction I just mentioned. So maybe there are several reasons can contribute to this mismatch between theory and behavior. First, maybe the effects on adaptation of neuron response in the mouse visual cortex is different than those in primates and carnivores. Second, maybe there exists alternative like direct change decoder that is either generic or task-specific. So in order to test the first possibility, we apply 2-photon Cosyne image to determine how adaptation affects neuron activity of the well-tuned layer 2-3 excitatory neurons in awake passive region mouse. And here the x-axis is the neurons grouping by its preferred orientation relative to the adapter. Here the adapter always vertical 0 degree. And y-axis is the neurons peak response normalized by the unadapted control condition. We found that adaptation selectively reduces the neuron activity with their preferred orientation that closer to the adapter, while with neurons with preferred orientation that are far away from the adapter, they actively remain unchanged after adaptation. So this orientation-specific adaptation is similarly observed on those in the primates and the carnivores. Therefore, we rule out the first possibility. Moreover, we feed this passive reviewing data into a theoretical, like empirical orientation estimation model, where in this model, it can estimate the orientation present on screen on a trial-by-trial basis based on the neuron activity of 10 to 15 well-tuned neurons that is simultaneously imaged. So to determine the performance of this decoder, we generate a trial-to-trial distribution of estimated orientation to this target stimulus and compare to the distribution to a trial-to-trial estimation of the orientation to the adapted baseline condition, mimic the animal's past performance. And if these two distributions more separable, indicate better performance on this detection. And we use area ROC value to indicate distribution between these two distributions. So when there's a bigger change, higher ROC value, smaller change, lower ROC value, which match animals' psychometric functions. So moreover, under this model, adaptation actually increase the ROC values for the smaller orientation changes, indicate under this model, like orientation estimation model, or adaptation actually improves orientation detection, which is inconsistent with what we observed in the behavior. We're also testing a bunch of other orientation estimation models, which all predict that adaptation will improve the detection, and therefore, we think that animals may not use orientation estimation model to solve this task at all. So then make us to wonder, maybe is this a generic decoder that animal adopt to solve this task? So a most simple one is just linearly sum all the neuron response with equal weight and generate a average sound response and apply a certain criterion threshold. If there are some response exceeding that threshold, animal will release level, indicate a change. So here, similarly, we use the ROC value to indicate the performance of this decoder. Here, just say like the neurons with equal weights across all its preferred orientation. We found that adaptation under this model actually impairs orientation change detection. It's consistent with what observed in the behavior. However, the neurometric function observed in this model poorly recaptured the psychometric function on animal. So make us think maybe animal adopt a task-specific decoder, which is not equally weighted across population. Maybe they preferentially weighting for the target preferring neurons. So we modify this model by applying the weights to the neurons that prefers bigger than 60 degrees, like bigger target changes into one, and make the weights of other preferring orientation neurons with 0. And this insignificantly improve, like steepen the neurometric functions while still remain the direction of effects of adaptation. And we know that most of the optimal decoder tend to negative weighting the distractor preferring neurons. So we going to, upon that, we apply negative weight of neurons that prefer the distractor. And we found that this modification actually inverts effects of adaptation on animals' behavior, or of the prediction of the animals' behavior. So these lead us to hypothesize that maybe animals adopt a task-specific decoder, which is like primarily rely on the target preferring neurons, but not negatively weighting the distractor preferring neurons. So to test whether this is true, we feed neuron data to animals' performance and find the weights across different tuned orientations. And indeed, we found the weights of the neurons that prefer easy, like big target changes tend to be positive. However, the weights for the neurons that prefer the distractor, their weights are not significantly than 0. So to contrast with this, we also find the weights of the optimal decoder, which can also use to solve this task, however, predict the opposite of the animal's performance. Actually found that similarly, this optimal decoder weighting the big target change preferring neurons. However, they tend to negative weighting the distracted neurons. So all these results suggest that our behavior is most consistent with a decoder that just simply rely primarily on the target preferred neurons and largely ignore adaptive preferred neurons without negative weighting them. So we know that optimal decoder require negative weighting of specific population of neurons, and this may require us like inhibitory circuits. However, our results indeed suggest animals prefer like adopt a suboptimal strategy where it is can simply implemented during from these like fit-for-work monosynaptic excitatory circuits, which can prioritize fast computation, and moreover, the synaptic weights can be easily shaped by a simple associative learning rules. So I want to thank my mentor and also Jeff Beck to contribute all the modeling stuff, and thanking the funding sources, and we recruit one looking for postdocs. Thanks.
So if the animal is using the suboptimal decoder, which also happens to be fast, do you think
Yes.
that would change if you allowed a longer integration period in the task so that they could use a slower computational strategy?
So for human, yes. So if you ask human to discriminate like detection orientation change, so if you want to focus on precision rather than speed, it will adopt a more optimal strategy. So we haven't tested for the animal. Our task require very fast reaction time window. So this may like contribute to this like suboptimal strategy.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, then thanks, Miaomiao.